Hi guys, today we're going to work on this beautiful 68 Camaro. This car has been upgraded with a 700R4 overdrive transmission. The installer put the original Crossmember, that was a 350 turbo Crossmember. What they did is they modified it and just moved it back on the frame rails. They modified and cut down the transmission mount. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out the original 350 turbo Crossmember and we're going to replace it with an aftermarket 700R4 Crossmember. And we're going to get the car up in the air. I'm going to show you the process of getting it out, and I'm going to show you the process of putting the new one in. And I'm hoping that this new Crossmember that I purchased will go in with no modifications and no problems. I got a feeling that I'm going to have to modify it. So we'll get the car up in the air and we'll see what happens. This is the transmission Crossmember that we're going to change out. It's this piece right here. This car is a convertible, so the exhaust is really tight. It comes back here and ties in together and then literally goes down the transmission tunnel. Only convertibles have this piece here. So that's a body brace to help strengthen underneath the car. And the exhaust goes all the way down the transmission tunnel and exits out the back of the car. So one of the things we have to do is we got to take this cross brace out, loosen our emergency cable here. This is the Crossmember. This is the piece we're going to change out, and I'm hoping it's I'm hoping that everything goes smooth and we don't have to weld and cut and modify the new bracket. This piece here is the Crossmember. If you see how it goes up over this exhaust, so I'm hoping the new piece doesn't hit the exhaust. Now we got that Crossmember out that goes right across here. Now we have to actually drop the exhaust from the front. Alright, so some of you might be asking or wondering, why don't I just change out this rubber transmission mount and leave the Crossmember? This Crossmember is sitting too high. And this transmission mount, the proper mount that goes in the car is actually maybe an inch higher, a half inch higher. So if I do that, the back of the transmission is going to get pushed up into the transmission tunnel. That will throw off the pinion angle for the drive shaft, from the transmission going into the drive shaft to the rear end. This is too nice of a car to just half-ass it. So one option would be to cut and notch this transmission Crossmember and have that sit lower and get a new mount and put it in it, or get the new Crossmember, which is what I decided to do. So we're going to try that new Crossmember through the new mount, and I'll show you the difference. You can see that metal is literally resting on the Crossmember. We've got the exhaust out of the way. The Crossmember is unbolted from the transmission. The transmission is loose, but it's resting on the Crossmember. The Crossmember is carrying the weight of the entire transmission and a portion of the rear of the motor. So there's a tremendous amount of weight on that. We're never going to get that Crossmember out unless we raise and support the transmission. So what I'm doing here, I've got a cinder block. And never set the cinder block on its sides because you can crush it. But I've got the cinder block standing upright with a piece of wood, a heavy piece of wood across it. I'm going to put a jack across that, and I'm going to put a piece of wood across the bottom of the transmission. You can see the 2x4 here. If you put the 2x4 across the transmission pan towards the rear and all the way across, you're not going to dent it. It'll support the weight of it, and you'll have no problems. So I'm just going to raise that up slightly. So we're going to take our bolts off both sides. The weight is off the transmission. The Crossmember is unbolted, so it should just slide right out. Here are the two transmission Crossmembers side by side. This one here is the one that we just took out. This is the new one that we're getting ready to put in. If you look at it, the 700R4 transmission actually in the car sits further back for the transmission mounts. The new Crossmember solves all of the problems that you have. Instead of trying to convert and modify stuff to make it fit, this Crossmember is got the bend in it to put the transmission mount further back where it needs to be. So then these holes will actually go in the factory holes on the frame. You don't have to modify the frame, you don't have to cut it. Should have probably just done this the very first time. But you live and you learn, and that's part of working on old cars. Trying to save money, trying to use something that I had. So here's the transmission mount. I haven't removed it yet, but I want to show you the difference. Here's the new transmission mount. See this big hunk of rubber at the bottom? That's to help insulate, take out all the noise and vibrations. If you look at it, you can see where the transmission mount was digging into the frame under acceleration. Anytime you're accelerating the car, the motor twists, so the transmission mount was digging into the crossmember. Alright, so now it's the moment of truth. Is this new crossmember going to fit without any modification? Hopefully. Let's find out. Hopefully I don't have to cut the crossmember and the exhaust will fit. Alright, so as I was concerned about, this is not a direct fit for this car. I probably could have spent the same amount of time and saved $60 and modified this piece here. But I'm kind of committed to it now. I want to see if I can get it to work. So what I'm going to do is to kind of match what the factory piece was. I put a heavier grit disc on this, so we're going to grind this down. We're actually going to remove a lot of metal. I'm going to grind this down about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to take about 1/4 of an inch out of this top piece and try to get it to fit. And what I'll do is I'll just weld in my own piece of metal here to give that some strength, since I am removing material from it. So I measured back, I made a mark. So literally from here back, I'm going to grind down material and remove it. I'm using an angle grinder with a coarse flap disc on it. Anytime you're using a grinder or any power tools like this, you got to make sure you're using eye protection and ear protection. I'll have links in the section below for the tools and parts that I'm using throughout this video. Alright, so here's the crossmember so far. I've ground down this here, probably took about 1/4 of an inch out of it. Took out about 1/4 of an inch here. You can see how much has been removed. So what I'm going to do is I've got a piece of steel here, a piece of flat steel. I'm going to make this fit, clean everything up, and weld this piece of flat steel on here. And I've got the same thing going on the other side. So basically what I'm going to do is just dress up the metal, clean up the edges so everything fits well, and then weld that steel in here. So what I'm using here is I've got a Dremel tool, and it's got a small cutoff wheel on it. The Dremel tool is one of my go-to tools for small detailed projects. It gets into tight spaces, it's easily controlled, and you can see here what I'm trying to do is I have the piece of metal that I want to fit in there, and I want a consistent gap all the way around that piece of metal so the weld bead will penetrate into that gap. So with the cutoff wheel, I'm able to kind of square up that hole, make sure that that piece fits the way I want it to fit, and have that consistent gap for a strong, solid weld. So for this piece of metal here, this is just a flat piece of steel. It's cold rolled steel, and I bought it at Lowe's. It's inexpensive, and it's a thick piece of metal, and I'm going to use the same cutoff wheel on the Dremel tool to cut that. You can see that I put a mark across it so it'll fit into the opening in the crossmember. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting my heavier grinder and cleaning up the metal. It's galvanized, or there's a coating on it, so I'm getting all of that coating off. I'm getting the rust off of it, and I'm just prepping this metal to be welded. And when you're welding, you need the metal to be clean and no impurities or anything into your weld, otherwise it'll weaken the weld. So I'm just going around all the edges that are going to receive the weld, cleaning them up, and making sure everything is squared and flat and smooth, and then I'll put that into the crossmember. Alright, so I want this piece to sit down flush inside here. I want it flush with here. I don't want to raise it back up on all the work that I just did. So all I do is I got a magnet right here. This magnet is going to hold the piece exactly where I want it so I can weld it. So I can just move it over, and I've got good gaps all the way around it to weld it. I can modify it just with a screwdriver if I need to. So I'm happy with the way that sits in there. I'm just going to weld that in, close up that gap, and weld all the sides, and then I'll be right back. Here's a few still pictures of the welds after they were welded in, and you can see the weld beads, and then after you can see the weld beads were ground down and the metal is smoothed out in preparation for final paint and finishing. The piece that we welded in is about as thick as this, so we did cut some strength out of here, but I think that piece of metal actually is going to be stronger and ties it all together, so I don't think we've done anything to hurt the strength. I think we've actually made it stronger. So you can see the little bit of clearance that we did on that side and the clearance that we did on that side. It's just a little bit, but it's much better to do it this way, take your time, than to go banging in the floorboards of the car. Here's some still photographs of the finished crossmember painted. You can see the recesses in it, and it actually looks pretty good. It almost looks like it's been manufactured this way. You can see here where I did the relief, how it fits up under the floorboard. There's no cutting to the floorboard, and it fits in. There's plenty of room for flexing of the body. And here's the passenger side, and you can see how much clearance there is between the floor and the crossmember. This is a view of the installed crossmember, and you can see how much more room there is compared to the original wider crossmember. The transmission sits in the proper location, and I'm happy with the fit. Alright, so now we're out test driving the car after we put the crossmember in. The car had previously a vibration, a noise, just with that solid transmission mount. It just was vibrating throughout the entire car. It was absolutely driving me crazy. So now that we changed the transmission mount, the car is quiet like it should be, like it was previously before this overdrive was put in. And I'm very happy with the finished product, even though I had to modify that. So I appreciate you guys watching the video, and I will see you on the next one.